Hello, viewers. My name is Adam.
And I'm Aaron.
This is Sick of Me Productions. Bring you another movie review.
Well, I did not think we was going to be getting to this point again at some point, but we got another Hunger Games movie out. And
it's during the most very tumultuous time to
yeah,
come out. Real world events just continues to be a very reflection of.
I said it before, at least with other people and whatnot, and it is really starting to look like Suzanne Collins has something here. I really hope that we don't get to this point, and after watching this particular film, I really don't need this to be the future.
Yeah, at the time of this video, like, you got two major war events that all happen on another side of the world, but you know, like, it's getting scary out here. But we're going to be reviewing today is the prequel to the Hunger Games series.
That means the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. If you're not really focused or at least remembered much of the Hunger Games series, this is basically a dystopian story, which means this takes place after a great cataclysm or world-ending event, and life had to start over. And in this particular case, we're focusing mainly on North America, which has been repopularized or reconceptualized into the nation of Panem.
So we reviewed the previous saga that was led by Katniss Everdeen, played by Jennifer Lawrence, and that was like from many young adult franchises that has been one of the most consistently good ones.
It's definitely one of my favorite series as far as young adult stories go, and of course for science fiction in general.
And here's something this is also a very difficult franchise to try and expand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially when, again, technically it has ended. The Katniss Everdeen saga, basically it had its conclusion. So to have the prequel is a situation in which you have to figure out whether or not it's warranted or needed at all. And, well, this is their
first attempt at doing so.
Exactly.
And it's also very troubling, especially for young adult franchises after the releases of those films, that type of genre in media actually they transition into more streaming television series.
That's true.
So for this film to be a theatrical release is a rarity nowadays.
It's definitely a gamble. So basically, you need to figure out, was that gamble successful? Now, this particular story, again, is a prequel. But unlike other prequels, or at least in the rarity camp in and of itself, this particular story centers itself around one of the primary antagonists of the series. This being, of course, President Cornelius Snow. Well, in this particular, since it's a prequel, this is his somewhat rise, or at least getting to that point. This is his origins in some form or another. And you really do have a sense of understanding, or at least through the eyes of this character, how he ends up becoming the man he eventually becomes in Katniss's era.
Where he's the president of Panem. And we see a lot of early days of how the early days of the Hunger Games themselves, and also how was the aesthetic like in the Capitol, and it's still like some of the universal themes that the Hunger Games still address are the classisms.
Very much so. So take it from that point of view. We find ourselves with Cornelius. This is some years after the events of the major world-shifting event for Panem, which happened to be the Dark Days, in which a civil war broke out between the overriding districts within the capital and the capital itself, in which it was a bloody conflict that eventually ended with the capital winning over the districts and surmounting their totalitarian regime and rule over the rest of them, and also placing in play the concept of a punishment and annual event known as the Hunger Games themselves.
And by the time this the story really takes place, it's the 10th anniversary of said event.
Yes.
The story focuses mostly in the perspective of the capital this time around.
Exactly.
Because Cornelius was born in that space.
And-
But thing is, the difference is that Cornelius Snow and his cousin Tigris, they are actually they actually was born in the poor section of the like after their once renowned family found themselves in the dumps.
Yeah, this actually highlights an interesting concept in which from the earlier movies with Katniss's era, you saw how because of the regime and the ruling of the capital over the districts, how certain districts were much more poorer than others, and how it was really hard, no matter which district you lived in, to survive under those harsh conditions. Well, having to see it from the point of view of the capital, you gain a sense of empathy in some form or another, to understanding why certain individuals would feel the antagonistic presence they do with the other side. In this point, you see that there was still a lot of construction that has to be made because of the bombings and the war efforts itself. And then you actually also see, just because you live in the capital, everything is not all rosy and gold. There's suffering there as well, and not everyone is treated very much the same.
Yes, it's basically like the difference between like living in the suburbs or living in a much more urban area is somewhere around. But the thing is, what this film does differently, or at least highlights a lot more than what was never actually addressed actually in the previous saga, is that within the capital, technically everyone is out for themselves and is just as cutthroat and trying to get ahead in life.
That is so true.
So seeing that that scope within the capital is a refreshing sight to see.
Focusing specifically on Snow's presence and his part in the story, Snow, who is a part of the Capital's Academy program, is trying to compete with his other fellow students, which he happens to be like at least top of his class apparently, for a scholarship program which will help him to achieve his goals into rising in the upper ranks and elevate his once noble family back to the points where they're supposed to be. But because this is a point of view in which the story of the Hunger Games is starting to develop into what it will eventually become, this year, because the
low ratings
of the games themselves, and God forbid why we have low ratings for the Hunger Games, the head of the academy and another individual in general has decided to flip things on their head and come up with a new concept for this prize of a scholarship.
Essentially, not only is this the origins of the beginnings of Snow's career, but this is also the beginning of how the Hunger Games shaped to be the pageantry and spectacle that we see in Katniss's era. Just to really bring things into more perspectives on how the whole film and story of this movie is taking place. A lot of it will come very familiar, especially in terms of the structure of the story.
Exactly.
And because of this is more of this two-sided origin story, or the beginnings of it, a lot of what we see is on a much more smaller scale than what is kind of like what they're trying to present it to be. And
I would say it's more intimate in its approach.
So I can understand in what we are that this is kind of sometimes it's like been there, done that. I will say that because this is like basically still faithful to what the book is, I would probably not have used so much of the Ballads of Songbirds Snake to an extent, because I feel as though if they was just going to keep it to this small scale level story, it could have actually just been a television series. But because of the theatrical release, and I feel as though to really like beef up the story even more so, I feel as though it would have been better to expand it to a point it encompasses President Snow's overall career.
Yeah, and that's something I feel as though this particular story is lacking, is a little bit more presence on his rising up the ranks. This one really feels as though this is just a snippet of
Like, it's the beginning of his start.
Exactly, and it's like for a movie that's going to talk about his origin stories, we could have pushed it a little bit further, which means this movie could have been a little bit longer, and I would have been here for that.
Longer, or whatever, what we saw could have been condensed to the first hour and a half.
That's true.
But that's, what we see is what we get.
Exactly.
Characters, Cornelius Snow, this played by Tom Blyth.
I feel as though this particular actor and this particular character really hammers home the unique attributes that the character of Cornelius Snow brings to this series. I feel as though the actor themselves really highlights the best qualities that was brought together to audiences in the silver screen from Donald Sutherland's performance and tackling his character. So it feels though this character, this younger version of Snow, does marries well into what eventually that character ends up becoming.
We do see a lot of the empathy from his performance. And
something I did not think that was going to be able to pull off.
But because it's like we do know where his life ends up being, it's just like we only get like near the end where that shift starts to take place.
Exactly.
And it's mainly due to the other, due to the actions towards basically the second lead or supporting lead, and Rachel Zegler's character of
Lucy Gray-Bard.
Yeah, Lucy Gray-Bard.
For this particular character, or at least it feels as though a lot of what you wanted out of them could have been brought together by probably a stronger actress, or at least an actress that would have been able to highlight more of what they were trying to emphasize. In this case, being a small town girl who was stuck in a completely terrible situation, but at the same time tries to make the best of it as well, while also trying to uplift individuals around them. Mm-hmm. I feel as though for Rachel's performance, I really did enjoy. I did enjoy her presence, especially for a lot of the moments in which we were able to empathize with her through her singing. I really enjoyed a lot of the songs that we got in this particular production, and I feel as though she really highlights that concept in itself. But at the same time, I also can't help but feel as though this is not necessarily a role where she really did make it her own.
On the other side of the spectrum, we have one of the earlier game makers, but overall, if there was an antagonist in this story, it would be her, played by Viola Davis' character, Dr. Viola Gall.
This role was just deliciously evil.
And it's campy.
Very much so.
Like, it's campy to the point that as the story goes around, it's a lot more grounded than what it actually on the surface is.
Yeah, it's very much a controlled evil that she brings to this performance. A situation in which you really understand, at least I feel as though she highlights the worst attributes that the Capitol has to offer.
On her sleeves.
Exactly.
On this other side of the spectrum, we actually have one of the co-founders of the Hunger Games themselves, played by Peter Dinklage, Casca Highbottom.
If you love Peter Dinklage's work, this is just going to be yet another role in which he does a great job with.
Mind you, this is something that another actor probably could have played.
I feel as though anybody could have played this role too. But because we got Peter Dinklage to do it, I feel as though he brought more of his presence into the role than anything else. And I feel when I say presence, and just because it's not like he was actually able to uplift it beyond anything else it was supposed to be. It's just because of the way, if you're very familiar with Peter Dinklage's style of acting, that's pretty much what you're getting here.
Yeah, he's really. He's a straight man too, but I know he's very campiness.
And that's really, at the end of the day, it comes from his main gift to this story, and his presence in this story of Cornelius's life is that he is very much personally Snow's antagonist.
Mm-hmm. One unique side of the things the story brought from the character from Josh Andrés Rivera. His name is Janus.
Yes.
One of the few wealthy district members who decided that he because he's a very high society of the district members, but he was able to live in the capital, meant through his father.
Yes.
We see a unique side of where is a switch that is a very reverse side of things. Of we're seeing Snow, who grew up poor, and who was a capital member, and you have his friend or acquaintance, who's a district member who actually grew up a lot more wealthier, but he feels a lot more guilt as opposed to Snow. It's like, so we see that unique dynamic, but unfortunately, because of they also have opposites of political views that really shape a lot of decisions that Snow makes.
And then I guess you have finally Tigress Snow's role in this.
It's kind of unfortunate because we see this character only briefly in the last film, Hunger Games. We see where this character goes eventually comes to be.
It would have been nice to have more, points in the story where we got to focus on them and themselves and what they brought to the story. Because I feel as though we needed more of that, and you just don't.
If we were to see Snow's overall spectrum,
you would actually see the evolution between their relationship as well.
But with that, production-wise, Francis Lawrence comes back as the director. He does another competent and basically brilliant job of elevating the material of what is on screen.
Exactly.
With a $100 million budget, this movie looks really good.
Yeah.
Especially compared to even a lot more higher budgets.
I feel as though one aspect that I'm going to take away from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is really much how this film was shot. I feel as though the cinematography in this one actually is probably on the better angle of where the series falls at. The way it's so dynamic in various scenes and various parts of the story itself. Especially once you get into the games and when you get into the more personal moments between Snow and the rest of the characters in general.
Yes, and when we bring up the fact that this is we mentioned the 50s vintage but yet futuristic aesthetic to it. We have this and it's nice, good analog but yet still advanced form of technology that is nicely realized throughout this film, and we see the beginnings of what will be a lot more of the extravagance of what we come to see later on.
If anything, I feel so because of the dynamic work in the production of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it makes me ponder as to what future stories in the Pan Am verse, I'm going to go ahead and coin it right there, might actually have going forward. There are stories that we can still tell that I would like to, delve into, and I definitely is if they want to expand beyond just Pan Am in general. But as far as we're considered with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as an origin story for one of his main characters, I would say
good.
Yeah,
because we know where Snow makes eventually becomes. So I feel as though it would have been better to expand upon, have a 3-hour film just expanding a whole career instead of just one particular section of his life. But there we have it. That was our review for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
As always, if you like this, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit our notification bell down there at the bottom if you want to get more videos just like this.
Also, here for our social media outlets of Twitter, X, Facebook, and Instagram for other content that we know that they post on this channel.
Because there's always so many hours left in the day and not enough time to do it.
All right, my name is Adam.
And I'm Aaron.
This has been Seeking Me Productions.
See y'all later.